We are going to start some of the halachot of Ben HaMesarim, the 3 weeks between Tisha B'Av and Shivasar B'Tammuz, the building up of the levels of mourning, of Avelut that we have in these 3 weeks, the 21 days between Shivasar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. And this has been really mentioned and hinted in the psukim themselves when Yeshaya Navi, and this is the Gemara in Ta'anit in Yerushalmi in Perek Dalet Halacha Hey, the Yerushalmi says that this was nirmaz. It was hinted to Yirmiyah HaNavi, who was the Navi of the Churban, the Navi that lived through the last years of the Bet HaMikdash Harishon, and he experienced the Churban. It was mentioned to him by the initial Nevuah when HaKadosh Baruch Hu shows him a makel shaked, which translates as a stick, a branch of almond tree. And it says, makel shaked anochi roeh. So I see a branch of almond tree. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, good, you saw good. Ki shaked anochi alor. I am going to definitely do this. And that would be the besorah, the negative news of the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash. But makel shaket, says the Yerushalmi, just like almonds, from the time that it blossoms until it finishes is 21 days, here also would be 21 days from the moment that the destruction started by the fact of them breaching the walls of Yerushalayim until the actual destruction and the burning of the Echal on Tisha B'Av. Obviously, there is one problem with this. The problem is that the pasuk in Yirmiyahu says that the Beit Rishon was breached not on Yud Zayin B'Tammuz but on Tet B'Tammuz, right? So how do you reconcile this? Because this is all talking about Beit Rishon, and the Yerushalmi itself elsewhere says that Beit Rishon also, even though the pasuk in Yirmiyahu says it was in the 9th of Tammuz, was not really on 9th of Tammuz, was on Yud Zayin B'Tammuz. So why does the pasuk say the 9th? Because they were so broken, they were so fatumled that they confused the days, which is a topic by itself. How can Nevuah of Yirmiyah Navi is written like that, right? And there's a lot of literature about this, not for time being right now, but nevertheless, in reality, says the Yerushalmi, even by Beit Rishon, it was the siege was broken and the town was breached by Yud Zayin B'Tammuz and was destroyed in Tisha B'Av, which by the way makes the whole thing so much more amazing that the statistical chances of two Batei Mikdash being destroyed 500 years away from each other and exact same day of Tisha B'Av by itself is a crazy statistics. Now imagine both of them also were breached in the same day of the Hebrew calendar. That's like impossible on top of impossible, right? Which is really the kiss on the forehead within the devastation of the destruction. Hashem is showing his hands that says, look, I'm doing it. Right? Chodesh Av is called Av because the father. That even though that sometimes you have to discipline the child with the father, and the love of the father knows no bounds, but and sometimes Hashem shows himself and his hand, whose muscles are rippled behind the reality of the harsh reality of Galut. That by itself is a nechama within the destruction. But be as it may, those are the 21 days in between the two destructions. As Shabbat-related brings the name of Rav Sadia Gaon, that these are actually hinted also in the pasuk in Daniel. Obviously, Daniel was one of the 4 people immediately after Churban Beit Rishon that was chosen by Nebuchadnezzar's guards to become ambassadors to the Jewish community, raised in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian Empire, and be the point of contact. Obviously, there's this history. He became very, very quickly became the favorite person of all time for Nebuchadnezzar. He became his right-hand man. He became his top advisor. And Nebuchadnezzar loved him so much that he respected him as though he was his deity, and he named him after his Avodah Zarah Belshazzar, a Babylonian name of his Avodah Zarah. So that's part of what happens afterwards. But Daniel, initially it says that for 3 full weeks, I didn't eat meat, I didn't have fancy bread, patbaka melech, and I didn't have wine. And Rav Sadia Gaon says these 3 weeks were the 3 weeks between Shivasar Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. So Rav Sadia Gaon himself asks this question. So wait a second, Pasuk in Yirmiyahu says it was the 9th of Tammuz, not Yuzayim Tammuz, right? But according to what Yerushalmi says that we explained, that is completely answered. So therefore, right, the Rishonim already, that we stay away from any level of simcha during the course of these 3 weeks. So 3 weeks of mourning obviously was initiated by ourselves because, in Yud Zayin B'Tammuz, it was the time that the Luchot were broken because of our first sin of, Egel HaZahav. We basically opted to reject HaKadosh Baruch Hu and His Shaliach, and therefore it became days of rejection, and it culminates by Tisha B'Av, which was the day that we rejected Hashem a second time and rejected Eretz Yisrael, rejected Hashem by rejecting Eretz Yisrael, and that's the first Tisha B'Av, which Hashem said, okay, Atem bechitem bechiyah shel chinam, you cried for no reason. Ani ekva lachem bechiyah ledorot, I'll make this night a night of weeping and cry for good reasons, for actual reasons, for generations to come. We all know the things that happened. This is Yirmiyahu Navi was born, actually, conceived, born on Tisha B'Av. He curses the day that he was born, right? And, the Bayit Rishon, Bayit Shari were both destroyed on Tisha B'Av. And even in the modern history, the Spanish Inquisition happened on Tisha B'Av, Tachbetat, Tisha B'Av, the World War I, which actually was the cause of World War II, started on Tisha B'Av, and many other events of such nature. It became like the day on the calendar, and we recognize that. We recognize that these are days that we want to mourn, but not mourning just because of the commemoration of what has happened, but mourning as reliving those experiences in a way that brings us closer to Hashem. In other words, whenever a person mourns a loss, you are remembering what was, right, before the loss. When someone, Rahman al-Islam, passes away, mourning, what defines mourning is, I remember how good it was when he or she was alive. I remember how amazing it was when I had the thing before the catastrophe, right? That's the definition of mourning by the Teichvert, that's what it means. So therefore, not losing sight of what mourning of Beit HaMikdash means, that is, we want to connect HaKadosh Baruch Hu in that way. So these are, in some ironic sense, they are the best days of connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Hashem is actually very much, it's a vulnerable time, right? If you could even call it that. It's an opportune time to connect. That's why we find that whereas in all year round, we can only say Tikkun Chatzot, the holy tefillah of Tikkun Chatzot, that it takes precedent even to Slihot. You can't say it during the day. You can only say it after Chatzot Halayla. During these 3 weeks, you could say it after Chatzot Hayom, right? During the day, it could be said after Chatzot. So that's opportune time to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in that way, because these are days of mourning. So based on what we're saying, based on the Yerushalmi and Sadia Gaon and others, these are actually times of reconnecting with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not just to be looked as, okay, we're going to hold my nose and close my eyes until he passes. That's a general approach to any mourning for us is like that. Like, we just can't wait until it finishes, go back to showering and go back to haircuts and go back to music and go back to normal life and vacation and so on. That would be such a chaval to limit these days to only that, the restrictions that you can't wait until it passes, but rather to view them as days that are valuable, days of reconnection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, taking the opportunity to realizing that even within the harshest moments of Klal Yisrael's history, Hashem has shown Himself and His love and His yearning towards us by the timing, by however He could. He has shown His presence and His providence over our communities, and therefore these are times that are appropriate for us to get connected with Hashem in a more meaningful way. Right? Any mourning is a appropriate time for connection, and this is no different. It's just us connecting with Avinu Shebashamayim, us connecting with the concept of having the Shekhinah amongst us, having the Kedusha of Shekhinah amongst us. Remembering that when we had the Beit HaMikdash, if you were Tameh, you couldn't enter the Mikdash. So we have those concepts. You just don't have the Beit HaMikdash, unfortunately. But a person that is Tameh is Tameh. A person that's tahor is tahor. Every decision that you make in life could make you tameh or tahor. Those things are things that we ought to think about. We ought to develop. And obviously, on top of all of that, the greatest mikveh Yisrael Hashem, the greatest purification process is the connection and learning of Torah and so on and so forth. That's why on Tisha B'Av, which is the climaxical moment of this morning, we stop learning Torah. So the ultimate averus is when you can't connect with Hashem through learning Torah, right? What does that say about the rest of the year? On Motzei Tisha B'Av, that's the time that you want to run to open the Sefer and learn Torah. Say, okay, now I realize that my connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is through learning Torah. Right? That's why I stay away from it during the Tisha B'Av, to make a point that this is actually the greatest tool, and let's use that tool, and let's utilize the opportunities of connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu through these 3 weeks. This is just a little preface for the halachot of Ben HaMesarim, and Be'ezrat Hashem will continue these halachot in the days to come.